So hi, hello and welcome again, Microbehunter here. These here are yeast cells, those blue dots, that I stained with fountain pen ink. It's a very safe stain, and today in this video I want to show you how you can do that. I think it's a nice introductory microscopy task, and it's also quite suitable for classroom use, especially because it's so safe. But of course, if you're a hobby microscopist as well, and if you would like to try out the first steps in staining, then that's also a video that you might like and enjoy. So we're going to get started. So I'm going to run you through the materials first. A little bit of water, a pipette is always useful, of course. Microscope slides are very important. Cover glasses, a couple of dishes, maybe to mix the stain with the yeast here as well. I'm using dry yeast. Of course, fresh yeast would also work, but I'm just using dry yeast. It does take a little bit more time to dissolve it, and of course you need some stain, and we'll be using fountain pen ink, readily available. Not quite temperature stable though, so don't heat it up, but it does work quite well. Now in this case the ink cartridge is unfortunately empty, but you can of course also get some ink in those ink containers here, or here I've got even yet a larger bottle here for a very large amount. Those dropper bottles also are quite useful. You might want to refill them. So I'm now going to use a sharp object to open the ink cartridge. I have to push in this little ball here. I'm just going to use scissors here. All you have to do is you have to push it in, and here a little bit, maybe the sharper edge of the scissor here works quite nice. And we are now ready to go. The first thing that I've done is I now dissolved the dry yeast in a little bit of water. This does take a little bit of patience because the dry yeast takes a couple of minutes to actually absorb the water. And you might want to agitate it a little bit or use a pipette. Simply was drawing it up with a pipette and releasing it again, and this kind of broke apart the clusters of yeast cells. And then I started to prepare the stain. I added a little bit of water again, and then a little bit of ink. Now I decided to dilute the ink a little bit because I was kind of worried that it might be a little bit too dark. We're just going to see in a minute or so that actually this was not necessary. As a matter of fact, it was probably even a little bit too dilute. So I used a small amount of this yeast suspension. Plenty of yeast cells already. I added the ink and then I mixed the ink together with the yeast, you see cover glass goes on top, and because there was so much liquid, I decided to use a tissue paper to remove some of this excess stain, of course you do not want the cover glass to float around, and you then also want to remove anything excess, because otherwise there's the danger of actually spilling the ink. So this is basically what I've done, and this is how it looks like under the microscope. It really didn't look a lot like anything, so I had to first of all find the focus, and then I decided to go up with the magnification. Of course, here this is now the higher magnification, but honestly I have to tell you, the yeast cells did not really look very blue either. It did not appear that they have actually accepted the stain. Here, maybe there are a couple of clusters that look a little bit blue, but actually not really very much. I mean, now we're able to see that some of the cells are a little bit bluish, but actually, the staining was rather disappointing. And so I essentially decided, I think maybe I've simply used too much water here. So I tried again. I applied a little bit of the yeast suspension, and then I went up with the concentration of the stain. I added 2 more drops of ink here. Of course, I remixed everything again with the remaining water that was there, and I gave it another try. I also think it's really important that after you've mixed the stain with the yeast cells, you do have to properly make sure that all of the yeast cells get in contact with the stain, with the fountain pen ink, and we're just basically repeating everything again. Excess stain is removed because otherwise the cover glass might actually touch the microscope objective. And here now it did look a little bit better, but still a far cry from what I actually was hoping to achieve. And usually the clusters of cells were the only ones that actually accepted the blue stain. So still a somewhat disappointing result. At a higher magnification, the clusters do look a little bit better, but there's still plenty of cells that seem to be completely white, and I'm kind of wondering why they did not accept the stain. If this has to do something with the age of the cell maybe, or simply not being able to maybe have not contacted the stain, I'm not quite sure. But especially at a higher magnification, I could see quite well that yeah, there's a huge difference in the color of those yeast cells. So last try. And now I again applied some of the yeast suspension, and now I directly added the stain. Again, I mixed, and no, maybe this is going to work better. And cover glass goes again on top, and yeah, it looks very dark now. And again, I removed yeah, all of the excess ink. I think this is pretty important to do. And here again, look, this one actually starts to look better, but still there are a couple of cells here that did not fully accept the stain. So what I recommend is that you probably give it a couple of minutes time for this yeast cells to absorb the ink. Yeah, but still, I think it looks much better now than the first try. And here, yeah, if I go up with the exposure time a little bit, then we can actually see quite nicely that some of the cells actually look quite blue, and others not so much. Here, and that's basically then the final result. Yeah, and I was now finally a little quite happy. What I do recommend is every time that you do remove all of the excess ink, because if you don't do that, as I'm going to just show you in a minute or so, then you're not going to get a sufficiently good contrast. Too much ink in the background, like I'm going to show you now. So last try, yeah, I'm again mixed some ink with the yeast. I dropped a cover glass again on top, and then under the microscope, yeah, I did not remove any excess right now, and then under the microscope you're not able to see anything at all. Everything will look way too blue, and essentially not enough contrast. Yeah, so what we learn from that is that after the staining process you do have to remove any excess ink to ensure that the cells have sufficiently high contrast. But even here we're able to see that some of the cells did not quite accept the ink, and I think yeah, maybe I have to wait a little bit longer for the cells to absorb it. That would be one possibility. Or maybe the cells yeah, are not able to absorb it because of a different age. Maybe I've seen this also before, that sometimes cells are quite different concerning their ability to accept the stain. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything. I would like to thank you that you joined me again in this tutorial session. There is a subscribe button somewhere, of course, if you're interested in these type of videos. But for today, that's all I would like to share with you. Happy microbe hunting as always, and see you around in the next video. Bye-bye.